Live from Washington, D.C., Jay Sekulow Live. Phone lines are open for your questions right now. And now, Chief Counsel for the American Center for Law and Justice, Jay Sekulow.
Hey, everybody. Well, Jared Kushner, the senior advisor of the president, has announced formally his Peace to Prosperity. This is the economic plan, a new vision for the Palestinian people. This is phase one of a multi-pronged approach to Israeli-Palestinian peace. Now, let me tell you something. I've been working in this region for 30 years. We have an office in Jerusalem. In fact, you'll be hearing from David Benjamin, one of our senior counsel in our office in Jerusalem later in the broadcast. But I've been working in this region for a long time. And about 10 years ago, I had the honor of sitting down with Shimon Peres, who was then the president of Israel, for a lengthy discussion at his residence about peace between the Israelis and Palestinians. And he mentioned then, in great detail, the economic impact, water, food, medicine. You're looking at a $50 billion increase or $50 billion investment over a 10-year period into the Palestinian areas. That would be Gaza and the Palestinian, or West Bank, we call the West Bank, to revitalize the economy, revitalize healthcare, revitalize education, revitalize economic development, put in place safeguards for the rule of law, for contract rights. A prosperous economy will do the most to eliminate terrorism. A people that are healthy tend to not send their children to kill other people's children. It's that simple. Now, initially, Mahmoud Abbas said he would not meet. And then about an hour later, I'm reading you the headline, Abbas says we are ready to return to the negotiating table. And the reason they're ready to return to the negotiating table is they have to. When you're looking at a $50 billion investment coming from a variety of sources, including neighbors, Jordan, Egypt, Saudi Arabia. That impact alone is very, very significant here.
Yeah, those three countries alone that Jared Kushner mentioned, Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon, we're not going to let Mahmoud Abbas mess this up for them, mess this opportunity up for them. They are much more powerful. That he oversees a sliver of a territory. They oversee nations like Lebanon, Egypt, and Jordan. And with this total plan that will be announced and presented tomorrow in Bahrain, the fact that the U.S. and the Trump administration, which is very pro-Israel, I just want to underscore this, recognize the first president to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Just weeks ago, recognized the Golan Heights as part of the Jewish state of Israel, is able to gather together through the backing of the Gulf states. They've got plenty of money and will make some of these investments. Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon to put the pressure on the Palestinians to get back to the negotiating table for money that will never get into the pockets of Mahmoud Abbas. These are business loans, again, investments. This is not a government-to-government grant. It's not like the U.S. is going to be taking your taxpayer dollars and giving $50 billion over to the Palestinian Authority. That needs to be made clear. These will be people that will be applying for loans, for infrastructure, and peace. And peace is ultimately what all Israelis, even the most hawkish Israelis, seek with the Palestinians. They've got bigger issues. They've got Iran to deal with. They've got Hezbollah to deal with and Hamas to deal with. They don't need to be dealing anymore with the West Bank Palestinian Authority.
All right, folks, we're taking a break. You know our work in the Middle East is extensive. We've been there a long time. We have an office fully functioning in Jerusalem. So as these initiatives comes up, our ACLJ team heavily involved. Your support of the American Center for Law and Justice allows us to stay engaged. We're in a matching challenge. Any amount you donate to the ACLJ is matched this month. We encourage you to do that at aclj.org.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, We could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
This is the Israeli-Palestinian economic plan to peace. Mahmoud Abbas has now said that he will, in fact, meet with the Trump administration, and he will, in fact, meet on a peace plan. And this was after they said initially he was not so inclined to do so. Now it says, Abbas, we're ready to return to the negotiating table. They want a recognition that Israel occupies the East Jerusalem and a vision of a two-state solution. So here's the potential for peace. The economic development starts with this. By developing property and contract rights, so this is, understand what's happening here. These are infrastructure things that have to happen before a dollar is spent. So it will be contract rights, the rule of law, anti-corruption measures, capital markets, pro-growth tax structure, low tariffs with reduced trade barriers. The idea being here, strategic infrastructure investment will then take place to improve the business environment and stimulate private sector growth. And then this is the most important aspect for the people in the Palestinian Authority. Hospitals, schools, homes, and businesses will secure reliable access to affordable electricity, clean water, and digital services. Now, Andy, 10 years ago, you and I sat in an office with Shimon Peres, the then president of Israel, and discussed this exact type of approach.
Yes, I was wondering if you would remember that I was at that meeting also, Jay. It was in Tel Aviv at the president's office. And, you know, I was somewhat almost skeptical, not skeptical really, but I was thinking, what's he talking about when he says maybe if we give them water, they won't kill us? But he knew, and he was a prescient man and a great statesman and a diplomat, and he knew from then that basic and fundamental things such as water, which the Israelis have the grasp on how to produce and to conserve, that is something that is a necessary component to creating a peaceful situation. And I see this as an extension of the vision that Shimon Peres expressed to us that day.
Well, here's what you got. Billions of dollars of new investment will improve, obviously, things like clean water. But also, this is what it says, businesses will have access to capital. The markets of the West Bank and Gaza will be connected with key trading partners, including, and this is interesting, Egypt, Israel, Jordan, and Lebanon. Wes, that's significant too.
Absolutely. The fact they have buy-in from the Gulf states and the other Arab nations cannot be, overstated. This is a bold, ambitious plan, and the thing I like about it, it is a totally new way of approaching a 60-year-old problem. It's never been addressed this way.
Nope.
In fact, the Palestinian people are suffering. Right now in the Palestinian territories, unemployment is 30%. In the Gaza Strip, it's 50%. This promises 1 million new jobs for Palestinians.
The resulting economic growth has the potential to end the current unemployment crisis, transform the West Bank and Gaza into centers of opportunity. Mm-hmm. That's the next move in this, Harry.
So one of the things that we should keep in mind is that economic growth in the Palestinian Authority arena, as well as Gaza, has been stunted in part by government misrule, and a precondition for the dramatic economic growth proposed by this program is to restructure and reform governance among the Palestinian people. So quintessential components of that include legal reform, property and contract rights, and an independent judiciary. This will help deliver the Palestinian people from misrule by the Palestinian Authority, and it will ensure that economic growth continues without further entrenching the existing Palestinian bureaucracy, which has basically delivered misrule for decades to the Palestinian people. So this is a very, very important initiative. It's a very, very hopeful initiative, and I think we should anticipate change within the Palestinian arena over the next 5 to 10 year period.
All right, so let's look at we'll take a call in a moment here, but this is, you're talking about a bold initiative. This is after the recognition of Jerusalem as the capital, after the Golan Heights is part of Israel's sovereign territory, and yet the Palestinian Authority has no choice but to go to the table. Why? Because the Lebanese, the Jordanians, the Saudis, the Egyptians are all saying $50 billion in assets, $50 billion in infrastructure for schools and health care. This could revolutionize what's taking place within the Palestinian areas right now.
So for the wealthy Gulf states, they're going to be partners with the U.S. in making these investments. So we've got them on board. And then for these countries that need the investments in infrastructure, like Jordan, Egypt, and Lebanon, this would be also countering Hezbollah's influence there. The fact that the Gaza Strip is included. Remember, the Obama administration would say they would be negotiating and they would leave out the Gaza Strip entirely.
Right.
The Trump administration is being very bold here and saying this is going to include the Gaza Strip. So we're going to put in, we will invest there. And what will the hope be there? That the people will say, I'm sick of Hamas.
Right.
You know, I want to open up a beachfront hotel because we're on the Mediterranean here on the Gaza Strip. And we could be like Beirut, but a safer Beirut possibly. Or maybe you also improve Beirut as well, so it's a place people return to, not just European kind of adventure tourists, but regular folks who, again, are looking for beautiful places on the Mediterranean, West City it used to be. This is how you get there. With this kind of investment, you push out the radicals because this is the test for the people. This is the test for the people. I get that.
Yes.
It's the test for the everyday person on the street. Are you willing to make the concessions to the Jewish state of Israel, which basically means you're going to knock that off,
right?
Okay, so that you have a much better life and that your children and that your grandchildren and their children have a much better life? Are you willing to move past Israel and ignore Iran and ignore some of these radicals? And if the Saudis have bought in, that means they're willing to move on past it. The Egyptians have bought in. They're willing to move on past it. The Lebanese have bought in. They're willing to move on past it. And you know they want Hezbollah out of their south. I think this is key. And it would then allow Israel to focus on the major threats, which are Iran and Syria.
Yeah, so here's what you have. I think this is what you got to put in a real perspective here. And this is, I think, fundamentally important. Understand there have been times in the past where there has been great trade and tourism between the Palestinian authorities and Israel. But there's never been this kind of infrastructure investment. And normally when there's been money put in, this is what Professor Hutchins is concerned about, it goes to the United Nations and it never gets to the people. That's not this plan. This plan is not we're writing a $50 billion check, us, the Jordanians, the Saudis, to the United Nations and let us know how it goes. This could end the refugee camps. You no longer need a refugee camp if you have 100% employment. If you have hospitals and schools and education, and you don't need Hamas and Hezbollah to be supporting that because you've got private sector funding and the rule of law and all of that put in place to eliminate the need for terrorism. Because let me tell you something. What Andy said is a joke or a statement that Shimon Peres said, which was if they're not dehydrated, maybe they won't kill us, is absolutely correct. If there is clean water, which we take for granted in the United States, but in the Middle East is a big deal. The idea that you have clean water, clean education, food, businesses, rule of law, contracts where you can go to court if there's a breach of a contract, none of that exists in those territories right now. This type of infrastructure makes a huge difference, Andy, in moving the ball forward. This is a plan to move the ball forward.
It does, and it's a very prescient plan in the sense that whoever was part of putting it together, Jared Kushner and his advisors, really realized that economics is the precondition to ultimate peace. If a person does not have access to a hospital, to a school, to electricity, to water, to housing, to roads and bridges, they're never going to be happy politically. Once you get them happy economically and socially by doing the kinds of things that this peace plan proposes, then they're going to get their minds off killing their neighbors because they're going to have the wherewithal, the economic structure to live in peace among them. And that's exactly what this plan aims to accomplish.
Let's go to Jerry in Rhode Island. I think it's a great question. Jerry, welcome to Jay Sekulow Live.
Hi, Jerry.
Hello, team. The zeal for which all of you are talking about this plan, and we know, listeners know, you've been studying this for several years, and you're referencing back to that 10 years ago with when the guy said basic necessities. And the misuse, here's my question, the misuse of government.
Yep.
I like the fact that we're not going to have the United Nations, there's nothing there. But how do you overcome some of those radical extremists getting to people? You can promise them a lot of these amenities, and it sounds like all of you observers of many years think this has great chance to work.
Because Hamas and Hezbollah, what the problem will be when the people are working, when the people are educated, when the people are being fed, when they have gainful employment and their children have a better life, Hamas and Hezbollah, and I'll go to Colonel Smith on this, don't look so attractive.
Absolutely. You know, the people in the Palestinian territories are sick of the corruption and the mismanagement. In the Gaza Strip, they're sick of Hamas planting missile batteries and ammunition warehouses in their schools and in their hospitals. They are tired of this. And I think it's much better to approach this in this new way and to spend money on infrastructure and jobs as opposed to weapons and ammunition, which is what's been going on in the past.
That's what the White House is saying through Jared Kushner. Take a listen, Bite 20.
Everyone cares about the Palestinian cause, so we care about the Palestinian cause, and we're trying to help find a solution. People are tired of the way that this has been stuck in the mud for so long, and what we're hoping we can do is get people to look at this a little bit differently, come together, share ideas, and then hopefully we can create a framework on which to move forward economically.
I think it's a brilliant plan.
The key word there's it's different. This is not, Jerry, the plans of the past. I think you're right. The plans of the past were throw money at the problem, and it was siphoned off by corruption, and it just never worked, or through the UN. This is a different way of looking at it. When we come back, David Benjamin joining us from Jerusalem.
All right, folks, we're taking a break. You know our work in the Middle East is extensive. We've been there a long time. We have an office fully functioning in Jerusalem. So as these initiatives comes up, our ACLJ team heavily involved. Your support of the American Center for Law and Justice allows us to stay engaged. We're in a matching challenge. Any amount you donate to the ACLJ is matched this month. We encourage you to do that at aclj.org.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.
It's not that we have people watching this broadcast from all over the world, but I just got a text from a friend of ours who's in Dubai right now. Well-known guy who got tremendous government experience, former official with DHS, and does a lot of economic transactions involving the Arab world. He said, I just said to him, I'm very pleased with the peace plan. I just texted. He said he was watching from Dubai. He said, amen to that. There's great excitement here as well. I think that is the key, that in the region that there is some excitement about starting a peace plan off with an economic incentive.
Those Gulf state leaders, and I think I know who you're talking about, where he is in places like Dubai, they understand influxes of cash resources to build business. They've also been able to do it and get around the corruption. And so I think for them, this speaks their language.
Yep.
Unlike dumping money to the UN, which none of them trust, just like none of us trust, and that money disappears into the hands of mostly UN officials, honestly. The corruption inside there is horrible. Remember with Kofi Annan's son and all of that?
Right.
So bypassing that and go to what is a very U.S. capitalistic model. Go to the private investors. Go to the private businesses. Put the money there where people really have a say and they want to use those resources. They don't want to just take them and steal. They want to build a business that makes more than what they were just given.
Yep. And it's again, we're joined now by David Benjamin, senior counsel for the ACLJ in our office in Jerusalem. David knows this region well. He lives there. He's a colonel in the Israeli Defense Forces, a brilliant international lawyer, a good friend. David, your reaction to this is phase one, the economic aspect of the peace plan.
Well, to me, it should be a no-brainer that economic prosperity should create an atmosphere conducive to advancing the peace process. This, by the way, is something the Palestinians themselves accepted in the Oslo process. There was the Paris Accord in the context of the Oslo Agreement, where the whole idea was to develop the economy between Israel and the Palestinians, and thereby promote an atmosphere for peace. And the idea being, which I think is being tested, and there's quite a lot of proof that this works, is that poverty and desperation, economic crises drive violence and war. Of course, not necessarily, of course, but in many cases that is the case. So to give an economic boost to the area as a basis for hopefully succeeding in a political settlement down the line, to me is sound logic, which is hard to argue with.
They're talking about, if you look at it, these are things we've talked about: hospital infrastructure, schools, home and business, access to electricity, clean water, and digital services. Like the clean water issue, David, which we tend in the United States take for granted. It is a big issue in the Palestinian Authority. It's a big issue in the Middle East.
It's a huge issue. Some analysts have said that water is actually the issue that is the cause of all the wars in the Middle East. It's a bit of an extreme position, but it's not difficult to see why that should be the case. This is a water-starved area, and the water doesn't always fall or is distributed in an equal manner between the different areas. In fact, if you look at an aerial picture of the Middle East, you'll see Israel is relatively green, but around you'll see desert for the most part. So the issue of water and distributing water, clean water that can be used, is actually very, very fundamental. It's not just it's not a side issue. It's a very major issue for both for the West, for Judea Samaria, and for Gaza. The issue of water, sewerage, water management is crucial. It's a big one.
Let me give you another example to our audience, too. This is part two here. It talks about the second initiative will empower the Palestinian people to realize their ambitions. And it talks about expanding online education platforms, increased vocational and educational training, technical training, international exchanges. But it also says equally important is access to quality health care. It will be dramatically improved as Palestinian hospitals and clinics will be outfitted with the latest healthcare technology and equipment. In addition, new opportunities for cultural and recreational activities will improve the quality of life of the Palestinian people. From parks and cultural institutions to athletic facilities and libraries, this initiative's projects will enrich public life throughout the West Bank and Gaza. David, I made the statement early in this broadcast that the fact is when you've got poverty and despair, and you said the same thing pretty much just a moment ago, that gives a feeding ground for terrorism. For radicalization. When you have a prosperous economy and a populace that is working and that they can look and say, my life is improved and the life of my children will even be better, that is a hallmark on how you bring lasting peace and stability to a country.
I think we have proof for that direction even in our limited area. If you compare the situation now between the Gaza Strip and Judea Samaria, the West Bank, it goes without saying that the Gaza Strip, which has a much more severe economic situation, okay, it's responsible for far more violence, far more conflict, far more agitation than the Judea Samaria, the West Bank, which is a far more, even though there's obviously a lot of discontent, for the most part the violence is far more subdued there. That is because the West Bank is more prosperous economically, just kind of one-on-one.
So let me ask you this. As you see this, David, just kind of your parting thought here, one of the things that Professor Hutchinson expressed concern about, and it's legitimate, is in the past, the institutional structures have not been there to support the rule of law. We've had the abuse of the United Nations as the arbiter of where money went. Making sure that the corruption is rooted out here. It was interesting that Mahmoud Abbas initially came out and completely rejected the plan, and an hour later had to issue a statement saying, I will go and return to the table, which tells me that he's listening to his populace who's saying, we want to give this a chance to work. But you've got to make sure the infrastructure of anti-corruption efforts are in place as well.
Look, corruption has been the bane of the Palestinian Authority. The corruption there is endemic. Obviously, it's a big question as whether that can be cured or if it's something that's so deep-seated that's going to be impossible to manage. I mean, I would like to be optimistic, and I think it's certainly worth a shot. What concerns me the most, Jay, and perhaps the biggest risk here, is that, and what we've seen in the past is if one does advance towards peace, what happens in parallel is that the forces who are dedicated to derailing the process and making it fail, they up their game, and then they up terrorism and etc. and put pressure on the process. So we'll have to see what happens going forward, of course, assuming that eventually the Palestinians, at least to some degree, come aboard here. And of course, everything depends on what will be also the political settlement down the road. One has to be careful about in the whole narrative here is that the Palestinians don't want to be perceived as having somehow been bought out. In other words, that they've somehow given up on their dignity or their aspirations for money. I mean, I don't think that is the case. That by no means the case. But at the moment, there are lots of voices on the Palestinian streets, at least, or in the government, making those kind of noises. We have to address that, I think.
This is how I think it's beaten back to UNRWA, which has been so scandal-ridden. The UN, a refugee and works agency, relief and works agency for Palestinian refugees. The same time that this is happening in Bahrain, they're meeting in New York. UNRWA is. And the aim is to raise $1.2 billion. That's nothing now. Right. The U.S. has got $50 billion on the table. So if you're a key partner in this, or if you're a businessman from the West Bank or Gaza or Egypt or Lebanon, I think, or Jordan, you look at this, you say, okay, UNRWA is going to give $1.2 billion to spend on their own,
Right.
The U.S. is putting together a plan where the Gulf states and the U.S. are going to come together and put $50 billion on the table. I think I'll go to that conference instead.
That's going to do it for the broadcast today. Let me encourage you again. We're in a matching challenge at the ACLJ. We've been talking about the Middle East. We've been involved there a long time. We've written 3 books involving the issues involving the Middle East. Rise of ISIS. Then we had Unholy Alliance. And then, of course, we finished up with our book on Jerusalem. 3 books that have come out of our work here at the ACLJ and our Center for the Study of Law and Public Policy. Let me say this. We are committed to working on these critical issues for Israel, for the Middle East, for the region. That includes the Palestinian people as well. Your support of the ACLJ lets us do just that. We encourage you to do that this month while we're in a matching challenge campaign. Go to aclj.org. Any amount you donate, we get a matching gift for. aclj.org.
It is a critical time for our nation, and the American Center for Law and Justice is on the front lines, defending life and liberty, engaging the issues that matter most to you and your family. Whether it's working to protect Americans from the dangers of radical Islam and the persecution of Christians, to defending life at the U.S. Supreme Court, to protecting your religious and constitutional freedoms, we could not do this work without you, without your support. And now your support can really make a tremendous difference. For a limited time, you can participate in the ACLJ Matching Challenge. If you make a gift now, it will be doubled. $25 becomes $50. A $100 gift becomes $200. Please stand with the ACLJ right now and call 1-877-989-2255. That's 1-877-989-2255, or go online at aclj.org. Thank you for your support.